Poor little girl makes a request to a billionaire. Today is my birthday, but no one cares about me. Can I spend it with you? The ending is heartwarming. The cold seeped through the thin layers of clothes Clara wore. 5 years old, a worn-out teddy bear in her arms, and nothing else. The little girl huddled against the brick wall covered in posters, seeking shelter from the wind that blew mercilessly that night. The lights of the restaurant across the street shone like unreachable stars. Clara watched the people inside, laughing, eating, living. They seem like they're from another world, she thought, a world she didn't belong to. Her stomach rumbled, and she hugged the teddy bear tighter against her chest. Mr. Bubbles, she called him. He had been her only friend since she was left alone. "Are you hungry too, Mr. Bubbles?" she asked in a whisper, adjusting the frayed little bow on the stuffed animal's neck. "We'll find something to eat soon." 3 months? That's how long it had been since her mother had gone. Clara didn't really understand what it meant to die. She only knew that her mother wasn't coming back. And then, a week later, her stepfather simply disappeared. He left her sleeping and never returned. "He'll be back tomorrow," Clara had told Mr. Bubbles that first night, then the next day, and the next. Until she understood that no, he wasn't coming back. A single tear ran down her dirty face. Clara quickly wiped it away with the sleeve of her coat. She had cried too much already, and crying didn't help anything. Her mother always said you had to be strong. She stood up carefully, adjusted the worn-out backpack on her shoulders, where she kept the few things she had managed to bring, and began to walk through the streets lit by the orange glow of the streetlights. People passed by her, as if she were invisible. Some even looked away. No one wanted to see a child alone on the street. It was easier to pretend she didn't exist. "Saturday is a special day, you know," she said softly to the teddy bear as she walked. "It's my birthday. I'm turning 6. Mr. Bubbles, naturally, did not answer, but Clara imagined he had wished her a happy birthday. "Thank you," she smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mummy always made a small cake for me." "With chocolate frosting?" Clara turned a corner, entering a darker alley. This was her room, as she called it. She had stacked some cardboard boxes, forming a kind of shelter. She even had a piece of tarp she found in the trash, which she used as a blanket. She crouched down and entered the makeshift shelter. In the corner, carefully folded, was a thin blanket she had managed to bring when her stepfather left her on the street, saying he no longer had to take care of someone else's daughter. It was her most precious treasure, besides Mr. Bubbles. "Home, sweet home," she muttered, repeating what her mother used to say when they got home. She lay down on the flattened boxes that served as a mattress. The hard edges hurt her ribs, but she was used to it by now. Carefully, she took a small plastic container from her backpack where she kept a few pieces of bread a lady had given her earlier. "Birthday dinner," she said to Mr. Bubbles, offering him a tiny piece that, of course, he wouldn't eat. Clara nibbled slowly, savoring every bite. She didn't know when she would get more food. After eating, she pulled the thin blanket up to her chin and hugged the teddy bear tightly. She closed her eyes, trying to imagine she was in her old room, with the light blue painted ceiling that her mother said looked like the sky. "Good night, Mr. Bubbles," she whispered. "Tomorrow will be better." It was what she said every night, like a mantra, a promise that helped her keep going. Sleep was slow to come. The city noises were frightening at night, distant horns, people shouting, the occasional bark of dogs. Clara had learned to stay alert even while sleeping. When she finally fell asleep, she dreamed of her mother. In the dream, they were celebrating her birthday. There was a small cake with a single candle. Her mother sang "Happy Birthday" in that sweet voice Clara missed so much. "Make a wish, sweetie," her mother said in the dream, and Clara blew out the candle, wishing for only one thing: to not be alone anymore. The sky was still dark when Clara opened her eyes. It was like this every morning, waking up before the sun to avoid anyone discovering her hiding spot. Her small body ached from the prolonged contact with the hard boxes that served as her bed. For a moment, she lay still, trying to hold on to the last fragments of the dream with her mother, but they dissipated like smoke. Today was different, a special day that no one but her remembered. "Good morning, Mr. Bubbles," she whispered, hugging the tattered teddy bear. "Do you know what day it is? My birthday. I'm turning 6. Clara sat up and rubbed her sleep-swollen eyes. Her stomach rumbled, a painful reminder that she hadn't eaten anything since the piece of bread from the day before. "Let's go find breakfast, shall we?" she asked the teddy bear as she tucked him into her coat pocket, leaving only his head peeking out. Carefully, Clara left the makeshift shelter, checking to make sure no one was around. The alley was still quiet. She picked up her bottle with a little water in it and took a small sip. She had to save it. "For my 5th birthday, Mummy made pancakes," she told Mr. Bubbles as she walked on the cold sidewalk. "Remember, they had chocolate chips on top." The streets were beginning to wake up. Hurrying workers passed by without noticing her. It was as if Clara were made of air. No one saw her, no one heard her. She was used to it. The sun rose timidly between the buildings, bringing a little warmth. Clara walked to a bakery and stood outside, watching the fresh bread in the window. The sweet, warm smell made her stomach ache. "Maybe someone will give us a birthday present today," she said quietly to the teddy bear. She stood there for almost an hour, until an employee came out to sweep the sidewalk and shooed her away with a wave of her hand, as if scaring off a stray animal. Clara kept walking, her eyes scanning for something to eat. Near a market, she found a fallen apple that looked good, with only one bruised side. It was her birthday breakfast. "It's tasty, Mr. Bubbles," she said, sitting on a park bench, biting the fruit carefully to make it last longer. "Want a piece?" The day dragged on slowly. Clara wandered the city, collecting a few coins that people tossed, looking at shop windows and dreaming of a different life. She needed to find food before going back to her shelter. "Let's try near that big restaurant," she said to Mr. Bubbles. "Sometimes they throw good food in the trash." Clara walked a few blocks until she reached a more elegant part of the city. The lights were starting to come on in the windows and restaurants. Well-dressed people passed by, some in shiny cars. She sat on the sidewalk in front of a brightly lit restaurant, hugging her tattered teddy bear against her chest. The smell of food coming from inside made her stomach ache with hunger. "Happy birthday to me," she sang softly, rocking back and forth. A tear ran down her dirty cheek, but she quickly wiped it away with her sleeve. Clara didn't know it, but that day would change her life forever. Reed Matthews adjusted his tie as he walked toward the restaurant exit. The business lunch had dragged on for over 2 hours, with endless discussions about mergers and acquisitions. As the owner of one of the country's largest tech companies, these meetings were part of the routine, but that didn't make them any less exhausting. "Until next time, Mr. Matthews," the maître d' said with a discreet bow. Reed just nodded. He was too tired for formalities. What he wanted now was to get back to the office, review some contracts, and maybe find a moment of peace before the next meeting. The afternoon sun was shining brightly, making him squint as he stepped onto the sidewalk. He had dismissed his driver, preferring to walk a bit to clear his head before hailing a cab. That's when he saw her. A small girl sitting on the sidewalk, hugging a teddy bear so worn out you could barely tell what it was. Messy brown hair, dirty clothes, and a look in her eyes that seemed much older than her apparent 5 or 6 years. Reed instinctively slowed his pace. Something about that scene bothered him deeply. Children shouldn't be alone on the street, especially not looking so abandoned. Where were her parents? Why wasn't anyone doing anything? He almost kept walking. Almost. It wasn't his problem, after all. The city had social services to deal with these situations. But then his eyes met hers. There was something in that gaze. It wasn't just sadness or fear, but a quiet dignity that caught him off guard. As if, even in that situation, she was still fighting to keep something inside her intact. Reed stopped completely. The girl, noticing his attention, straightened up a little. Her small hands tightened their grip on the teddy bear. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just observed each other, the man in the expensive suit and the abandoned child on the warm sidewalk. Then, to Reed's surprise, the girl stood up. With hesitant steps, she approached him. She stopped at a safe distance, still clutching the teddy bear as if it were a shield. "Mr." Her voice was almost a whisper, as fragile as she was. Today is my birthday. Reed found himself leaning in to hear better. But nobody cares about me, she continued, her eyes fixed on his shoes, as if she didn't have the courage to look any higher. Can I spend my birthday with you? The question hit him like a punch to the gut. Of all the things he expected to hear, that simple request was so far off his radar that Reed found himself momentarily speechless. He knelt down to her level, getting on one knee without a thought for his expensive suit pants or the curious glances of passers-by. What's your name? He asked with a gentleness he didn't know he possessed. Hi, Clara, she answered, finally looking into his eyes. And this is Mr. Bubbles, she added, slightly lifting the tattered bear. It's a pleasure to meet you, Clara, and Mr. Bubbles. Reed couldn't help a small smile. I'm Reed. The girl's stomach rumbled, loud enough for both of them to hear. She looked down, embarrassed. Are you hungry? Reed asked, already knowing the answer. Clara nodded shyly. Well, we can't have you going hungry on your birthday, can we? He held out his hand to her. I know a place nearby that makes the best burgers in the city. What do you think? Clara looked at his outstretched hand with suspicion. Her eyes darted between Reed's face and his hand, as if assessing the danger. I'm not going to hurt you, Clara, Reed said gently. I just want to help. After another moment of hesitation, Clara's small hand met his. It was calloused and dirty, with broken fingernails that told stories of difficult days. Can Mr. Bubbles come too? She asked, her voice even lower. Of course, it wouldn't be a birthday without Mr. Bubbles, right? A faint smile appeared on the girl's face, so quick it was almost missed. Reed led her down the sidewalk, adjusting his long strides to match her short little legs. It wasn't far, just 2 blocks, but for Clara it felt like a grand journey. The diner was a simple but welcoming place. Colorful tables, comfortable booths, and the unmistakable smell of grilled burgers. It wasn't the kind of establishment Reed normally frequented, but it seemed perfect for the occasion. When they entered, a few people glanced curiously at the elegantly dressed man, accompanied by a visibly homeless child. Reed ignored the stares and chose a booth by the window, where the sunlight streamed in and warmed the space. What would you like to eat? He asked after they sat down. Clara seemed confused by the question, as if she wasn't used to choosing. A hamburger, Reed suggested, with French fries and maybe a milkshake? Her eyes widened at the mention of a milkshake. Can it be chocolate? She asked, almost in disbelief. Of course it can. It's your birthday, after all. The waitress came to take their order, and Reed ordered a deluxe burger, French fries, and a chocolate milkshake for Clara, and just a coffee for himself. While they waited, Clara sat Mr. Bubbles on the seat next to her. Reed noticed how she carefully arranged the bear, as if it was something precious. How old are you turning today, Clara? 6, she answered, holding up her small, dirty fingers. 6 years old. That's an important age, Reed commented. You must be excited to start school. Clara's face darkened slightly. I wanted to go to school. Mommy said I would learn to read stories. Is your mom not with you right now? Reed asked carefully. Clara shook her head, her eyes fixed on the table. She got sick. Very sick. The people at the hospital said she went to heaven. A lump formed in Reed's throat. I'm so sorry, Clara. Me too, she said with a heartbreaking simplicity. The food arrived, momentarily interrupting the conversation. Clara's eyes lit up at the sight of the meal, a hamburger that looked huge compared to her little hands, a generous portion of golden French fries, and a tall milkshake with whipped cream on top. You can eat, Reed encouraged. She needed no further encouragement. She picked up the burger with both hands and took a bite as big as her mouth would allow. A bit of ketchup dripped down the corner of her lips, but she didn't seem to notice, focused on her first decent meal in days. Reed watched her in silence. There was something profoundly disturbing about seeing a child so young eat with such eagerness, as if she feared the food might disappear at any moment. Between bites, Clara started to talk, as if the walls protecting her were slowly beginning to crumble. We used to live in a small place there, she said, dipping a fry in ketchup. Mommy worked a lot. Sometimes she'd come home so tired she'd fall asleep with her shoes on. Reed listened attentively, realizing it might be the first time in a long while that someone was truly paying attention to what Clara had to say. "Dad, we didn't have much money, but Mommy always brought me a piece of candy on the weekend." She took a sip of her milkshake, leaving a chocolate mustache that Reed resisted the urge to wipe away. "Then Tom came to live with us." "Tom? Mommy's boyfriend. He didn't like me very much." Reed felt his jaw muscles tighten. "And what happened to him?" Clara shrugged, a strangely adult expression on her childish face. "When Mommy died, he said he didn't have to take care of someone else's daughter anymore. He left me on the street." She spoke as if commenting on the weather, with no inflection of anger or sadness, just acceptance. Something broke inside Reed at that moment. An anger he hadn't felt in years rose in his throat, along with a wave of protectiveness so intense it surprised him. "How long have you been on the street, Clara?" he asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "I don't know exactly. A lot of days." She thought for a moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The moon has been round 2 times. 2 months." This child had been surviving alone on the streets for approximately 2 months. "Where do you sleep?" "I have a spot," she answered, suddenly wary, as if afraid her hiding place might be discovered. "I made a house out of boxes, and I have a blanket." Reed swallowed hard. A house of boxes, a blanket. That was all she had in the world. The sunlight streamed through the window, creating golden patterns on the table between them. Outside, people rushed by, lost in their own lives, oblivious to the small drama unfolding inside. Clara finished her burger and focused on the fries, occasionally sharing one with Mr. Bubbles, pretending the bear was eating. "Are you enjoying the food?" Reed asked, trying to push away the image of Clara sleeping in cardboard boxes. She nodded enthusiastically, her mouth too full to reply. "You know something, Clara. I think a birthday needs more than just lunch." Her eyes lifted, curious. "What do you say we continue the celebration?" Reed suggested, hardly believing his own words. He had important meetings in the afternoon, emails to answer, a company to run. But none of that seemed important right now. "Celebrate more?" Clara asked, as if the concept were hard to grasp. "Yes, after all, it's not every day you turn 6. A genuine smile lit up Clara's face for the first time, completely transforming her appearance. Suddenly, she looked exactly like what she was. Just a child. A child who, despite everything, could still smile. And in that moment, Reed knew he couldn't let her go back to the streets. "Where are we going?" Clara asked as she walked beside Reed, her small hand still holding his with surprising firmness. Reed smiled, looking down to meet the girl's curious eyes. "Have you ever been to an amusement park?" Clara shook her head, but her eyes widened with interest. "Is it fun?" "It's the most fun place in the world," Reed replied with a conviction that made Clara's face light up. "Perfect for celebrating birthdays." They walked a few blocks, passing office buildings and bright storefronts. Reed noticed how Clara observed everything with attentive eyes, as if cataloguing every detail of the world around her. There was a sharp intelligence behind that gaze, despite all the hardship life had already thrown at her. When they turned the corner, the park appeared before them, an explosion of color, lights, and motion that contrasted with the grayness of the city. Even at that time of day, the colorful lights of the rides blinked cheerfully, creating an almost magical scene. Clara stopped, her mouth agape. The Ferris wheel rose majestically against the sky, turning slowly. The golden carousel glittered under the sun, colorful horses rising and falling to the sound of cheerful music. Children ran from one side to the other, holding cotton candy and balloons. "It's so beautiful," she whispered, clutching Mr. Bubbles to her chest. Reed felt a strange ache in his chest, a mix of tenderness and sadness, as he realized that such simple things, which most children took for granted, were completely new to Clara. "Shall we go in?" he invited, gently squeezing her hand. Clara nodded enthusiastically, hopping with excitement as they approached the ticket booth. "2 tickets, please," Reed asked the attendant. "1 adult and 1 child." "The little girl's ticket is free today," the man informed him with a smile. "So we have a special summer promotion." Reed thanked him and took the colorful wristbands that granted access to all the rides. He knelt to put one on Clara's thin wrist. Now you can go on any ride you want, he explained, adjusting the wristband so it wouldn't fall off. All of them, Clara asked in disbelief. All of them, Reed confirmed. Where do you want to start? Without hesitation, Clara pointed to the carousel, her eyes fixed on the horses gracefully rising and falling. Excellent choice, Reed approved. They headed to the ride, and Reed lifted Clara so she could choose her horse. She opted for a white one with golden details and a vibrant red mane. Hold on tight, okay, Reed recommended, placing her small hands on the metal pole. I'll be right here beside you. As the carousel began to turn, something extraordinary happened. Clara laughed, a genuine, crystalline laugh that seemed to come from somewhere deep and untouched within her. It was the sound of an ordinary child, enjoying a moment of pure joy. Reed took his phone out of his pocket and captured that moment. Clara on the white horse, her messy hair flying in the wind, a smile so wide it seemed to light up her whole face. Something for her to remember later, he thought. After the carousel came other rides, the bumper cars, where Clara shrieked with excitement every time she managed to hit another car. The little train that traveled through the park, offering a panoramic view of the rides, even the mini roller coaster, where she squeezed Reed's hand tightly during the first drop, but was soon raising her arms and screaming with delight. Between rides, Reed bought her blue cotton candy. Clara stared at it with fascination before taking the first bite, and then her eyes widened with pleasure as the sweet treat dissolved in her mouth. It's like a sweet cloud, she exclaimed, making Reed laugh. For a few hours, the worries of the world seemed to disappear. Reed completely forgot about the missed meetings, the unanswered emails, the ignored calls. Clara seemed to have forgotten, at least temporarily, the harsh reality of her life on the streets. She ran from one ride to another, pulling Reed by the hand, her energy seemingly endless. Mr. Bubbles was held securely under her arm, silently witnessing his owner's transformation. When Clara finally began to show signs of fatigue, the sun was already starting to dip toward the horizon. There's one more surprise, Reed announced, guiding her out of the park. More? Clara asked, her eyes tired but still shining with excitement. Reed nodded, leading her down the sidewalk to a colorful toy store on the corner. The window display was filled with teddy bears, cars, games, and dolls. Clara stopped, admiring the display as if it was some kind of magical treasure. Let's go inside, Reed invited, opening the door for her. The inside of the store was even more impressive, floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with toys of every imaginable kind. Clara walked slowly, looking at everything with reverence as if she were in a precious museum. You can pick out a birthday present, Reed said. Clara looked at him, confused. I can. Of course. Anything you want. She blinked several times, as if processing the information. Then, carefully, she began to explore the store. She passed the giant teddy bears, the electric trains, the puzzles. She lingered in the doll section, where rows and rows of different models stared back at her with bright eyes and painted smiles. Reed watched her, curious about what she would choose. He imagined she might opt for a new bear, since Mr. Bubbles was so worn, or maybe a game or an art set. After a few minutes of silent contemplation, Clara approached a shelf in the corner. There, sitting among much more elaborate and expensive dolls, was a simple rag doll with brown yarn hair and a light blue dress. No mechanisms, lights or sounds, just a traditional doll with an embroidered smile and button eyes. Clara picked it up carefully, as if afraid of breaking it. She ran her fingers over the fabric of the dress, adjusted the small bow in its hair. Then she hugged it to her chest, alongside Mr. Bubbles. Is this the one you want? Reed asked, a little surprised by her modest choice. Clara nodded, looking at the doll fondly. She looks lonely, she explained simply. She needs someone to take care of her. Something tightened in Reed's chest. How could this child Umaz, who had so little, still think of caring for others? Her empathy, even after everything she had been through, was astounding. It's a wonderful choice, Reed approved, guiding her to the checkout. When they left the store, Clara was holding the new doll in one arm and Mr. Bubbles in the other, a soft smile on her face. What are you going to name her? Reed asked. Clara thought for a moment. Star, she decided, because she shines like the stars in the sky. The sun was beginning to set when Reed noticed a small coffee shop across the street. The warm yellow lights inside created a cozy atmosphere, visible through the large windows. "How about a snack before we go?" he suggested. Clara nodded, clearly tired but not yet wanting the day to end. The coffee shop was cozy, with wooden tables, comfortable armchairs, and the aroma of coffee and freshly baked pastries. Reed chose a table in the corner, where Clara could sit comfortably. "What will you have?" he asked, looking at the menu. Can I choose?" she asked shyly. "Of course." Clara looked at the pastry display, her eyes scanning the cakes, pies, and cookies until they stopped on the colorful cupcakes. "That one." She pointed to a chocolate cupcake with pink frosting. Reed placed the order, a cupcake for Clara and a coffee for himself. When the items arrived, he asked the waitress for something special, and she returned a minute later with a small candle. Carefully, Reed placed the candle in the center of the cupcake and lit it with a lighter the waitress lent him. "Every birthday needs a cake with a candle," he explained, pushing the cupcake toward Clara. "And when there's a candle, you get to make a wish before you blow it out." Clara's eyes fixed on the small flame dancing atop the cupcake. The fire reflected in her pupils, creating golden points of light. "Close your eyes, think of your wish, and then blow out the candle," Reed instructed. "But don't tell anyone your wish or it won't come true." Clara squeezed her eyes shut, her little face scrunched in concentration. For several seconds, she remained completely still, taking the wish very seriously. Then, she opened her eyes, took a deep breath, and blew out the candle with determination. The flame went out, and everyone in the coffee shop applauded, the waitress, the barista, and even a few customers who had been watching the scene with smiles. "Happy birthday," Reed wished. Clara smiled, her eyes shining brighter than the lit candle had. Then she leaned toward Reed and whispered, "Can I tell you my wish?" "But then it might not come true," he warned. "Faye, that's okay," she replied with wisdom beyond her years. "I think it's already coming true." Curious, Reed leaned in to listen. "What did you wish for?" "I wished to have someone to take care of me," Clara answered in a whisper, her eyes fixed on his as if trying to see into his soul. Reed felt a lump in his throat. Something broke and mended itself inside him simultaneously. It was such a simple and yet profound wish, to have someone, something every child should have by right, not as a special birthday wish. "That's a good wish," he managed to say, his voice slightly choked. Clara smiled, seemingly satisfied, and began to eat her cupcake, licking the pink frosting first as all children do. Reed watched her in silence, realizing something had shifted within him over the course of the day. What had started as an impulse to help an abandoned child had become something deeper. He couldn't just return her to the streets after this. Her wish to have someone take care of her echoed in his mind like a call he couldn't ignore. When Clara finished her cupcake, her fingers and the corner of her mouth was smudged with chocolate. Reed gently wiped her face with a napkin. "I think it's getting late," he said, noticing the sky outside was already darkening. "Boys, where are you sleeping, Clara?" The question brought reality crashing back. Clara's smile faltered a bit, as if she, too, was reminded that the magical day was coming to an end. "Can I show you?" she asked hesitantly. "It's not far." Reed nodded, paying the bill and helping her gather her new treasures, Star, the doll in the blue dress, and the ever-faithful Mr. Bubbles. They stepped out of the coffee shop into the falling night. The city lights were beginning to switch on, creating an urban landscape of light and shadow. Clara led him with confidence, turning into alleys and crossing streets with the familiarity of someone who knows the territory well. After about a 15-minute walk, she turned into a narrow alley between two office buildings. The place was dim, with only the distant light from street lamps partially illuminating the entrance. "It's here," Clara said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. Reed followed her, a tightness in his chest as he realized where the little girl had spent the last 2 months. The alley was damp and cold, with trash cans lining the walls and the distinct smell of neglect. At the back of the alley, Clara had created her little refuge. Cleverly stacked cardboard boxes formed a sort of hut, A piece of plastic tarp covered the top, presumably for protection from the rain. Inside, he could see a thin blanket folded neatly on more flattened boxes that served as a mattress. "This is my home," Clara explained, with a mixture of pride in her ingenuity and shame at its precariousness. Reed felt the lump in his throat tighten until it almost choked him. Something inside him revolted at the idea that a 6-year-old child considered this a home. A pile of boxes in a dark alley, where anything could happen, where cold, hunger, and danger were constant companions. Clara ducked down and entered the makeshift shelter, carefully placing her new doll beside the blanket. "Sometimes the rain gets in through the cracks," she explained, pointing to damp spots on the boxes. "But the blanket stays dry if I wrap myself up tight." Reed swallowed hard, fighting the emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. How was it possible that in a city full of people, no one had helped this child? How was it possible that she had been so completely forgotten? Clara arranged her small space, seeming strangely adult in her methodical movements. She was preparing for another night alone in that place. Reed couldn't take it anymore. The decision crystallized in his mind with absolute clarity. "Clara," he called, his voice firm despite the emotion, "you're coming with me tonight?" She stopped what she was doing and looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "You're not staying here," Reed explained, kneeling to be at her level. "You're coming to my house. No child should sleep alone in a place like this." Clara's eyes widened, a mixture of hope and suspicion. "Really? Really? You can bring Mr. Bubbles, Star, and anything else you want. I have a guest room with a real bed and hot water for a bath." Clara bit her lip, looking around at her small shelter as if saying goodbye. Then she picked up the thin blanket and folded it carefully. "Can I bring this?" she asked. "Mommy gave it to me." "Of course you can," Reed assured her, his heart aching again. With quick movements, Clara gathered her few belongings: the blanket, a tattered backpack with some clothes, a toothbrush with worn bristles, and a crumpled photo showing a much younger her next to a smiling woman. "I'm ready," she announced, holding Mr. Bubbles and Star in one arm and the backpack in the other. Reed took her backpack and held out his free hand. Clara grabbed it tightly, as if afraid he might change his mind at any moment. As they walked out of the dark alley back onto the brightly lit city streets, Reed felt the weight of the responsibility he had just taken on. He didn't know exactly what he would do next, how he would explain this to his lawyers, his family, his colleagues. He didn't know what legal complications he might face, but looking down and seeing Clara walking beside him, clutching his hand like a lifeline, he knew he was doing the right thing. Her wish to have someone take care of her had already begun to come true. And somehow, Reed realized that his own wish, one he didn't even know he had, was coming true as well. The taxi pulled up in front of an elegant building in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. Clara looked out the window, her eyes wide at the imposing facade illuminated by discreet lights. "You live here?" she asked, her voice almost disappearing in awe. Reed nodded as he paid the driver. "On the top floor." Clara held Mr. Bubbles and Star tighter, as if drawing courage from her toys. Reed took her small backpack and offered his free hand, which Clara promptly accepted. The uniformed doorman nodded respectfully as they entered the marble lobby. "Good evening, Mr. Matthews." "Good evening, Frank," Reed replied, feeling Clara shrink slightly beside him, intimidated by the luxurious surroundings. Frank glanced briefly at the girl, but his professionalism kept him from asking any questions. He just pressed the elevator button and held the door open for them. "Thank you," Reed said, guiding Clara inside. The elevator was mirrored, with gold accents and dark wood paneling. Clara looked at her own reflection and seemed surprised by what she saw: a disheveled girl in dirty clothes, her face marked by days on the streets, holding 2 worn-out toys. Beside her, Reed seemed to belong to another world in his impeccable suit. "It's very high," she commented as the elevator began its silent ascent. "Yes, but the view is beautiful," Reed replied, trying to put her at ease. "You can see the whole city from up there." When the doors opened, they stepped directly into Reed's apartment, a duplex that occupied the entire top floor of the building. The space was vast and elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the illuminated city below. Clara stopped at the entrance, hesitant to step on the polished hardwood floor. "It's okay," Reed encouraged. "You can come in." She took a few cautious steps, as if afraid of breaking something with her mere presence. The living room was minimalist, with white leather sofas, glass tables, and contemporary art on the walls. There were no toys, family photos, or any sign that a child had ever been there before. "Your house is pretty," Clara said politely, still standing in the middle of the room, unsure of what to do or where to sit. "Thank you," Reed replied, noticing for the first time how cold and impersonal the place felt. "Come, I'll show you where you can sleep." He led her down a hallway to a spacious guest room with a king-size bed that looked gigantic for Clara's size. "This can be your room for now," he explained, turning on the lights. The room was elegant but clearly designed for adults, neutral tones, sophisticated furniture, without a single childish touch. Clara looked around, impressed. "Is this all for me?" "Yes," Reed confirmed, placing her backpack on a chair in the corner. "But first, how about a warm bath?" He took her to the adjoining bathroom with its spacious tub and high-pressure shower. He opened a few drawers until he found a clean t-shirt that could serve as a nightgown for her. "I'll leave you to it," he said, placing soft towels on the counter. "There's soap, shampoo, and everything you'll need here. This shirt can work for sleeping until we get you proper clothes." Clara nodded, still looking a bit lost in the luxurious space. "I'll be in the living room if you need anything," Reed added. "Just call." He closed the door and returned to the living room, suddenly aware of the silence he usually didn't even notice. His phone vibrated in his pocket. More emails, more messages, more company problems awaiting his attention. But for the first time in years, Reed ignored them completely. Instead, he went to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator, realizing how empty it was. A few basic items, drinks, frozen food, nothing suitable for a child. He made a mental note to arrange for a decent breakfast and go grocery shopping the next day. He grabbed his laptop and began researching the legal procedures for temporarily caring for an abandoned child. The information was complex and varied, but one thing was clear: he would need to notify the proper authorities as soon as possible. After about 20 minutes, he heard the sound of the bathroom door opening. Clara appeared in the living room, looking like a completely different person. Her brown hair, now clean, fell in damp curls over her shoulders. Reed's t-shirt worked like a dress on her, reaching almost to her ankles. Her face, free from the street's grime, revealed freckles on her nose and rosy cheeks. She was still holding Mr. Bubbles, who was now also clean and dripping a little. "I gave him a bath too," Clara explained shyly. "He was very dirty." Reed smiled. "You both look great." Clara approached the sofa but didn't sit down, as if she still wasn't sure if she was allowed. "Are you hungry?" Reed asked. She shook her head. "Just a little tired." "It's been a big day," he agreed. "Want to get some rest?" Clara glanced at the sofa and then down the hall toward the guest room. "Can I stay here for a little bit?" "Of course," Reed replied, understanding her hesitation to be alone in a strange environment. She climbed onto the white sofa, her small, clean feet barely touching the leather. She sat primly in the corner, with Mr. Bubbles and Star settled in her lap. Reed noticed she had washed the new doll as well. "Want to watch some television?" he offered, picking up the remote control. Clara nodded enthusiastically. Reed turned on the massive TV that dominated one of the walls and searched for a cartoon channel. He found an animated movie about a brave princess, and Clara's eyes immediately locked onto the screen. "Do you like this one?" he asked. "I've never seen it," she replied, already completely absorbed in the story. Reed sat at the other end of the sofa, giving her space. Slowly, as the movie progressed, Clara began to relax. Her eyes started to blink sleepily, but she fought to keep them open, clearly not wanting to miss a moment of the story. At some point, without Reed noticing exactly when, she fell asleep. Her small body slumped to the side, her head resting on the arm of the sofa, her arms still wrapped around her precious toys. Reed watched her for a long moment. Asleep, Clara seemed even smaller and more fragile. The marks of the hard life she had led were still visible on her too thin body, in some scratches and bruises on her arms and legs that the bath couldn't wash away. Careful not to wake her, he took a soft blanket from a closet and gently covered her. Clara didn't move, except for a slight sigh of contentment as the warmth of the blanket enveloped her. Reed sat in the armchair across from her, watching the girl sleep. The TV was still on, the volume low, the animated colors reflecting on Clara's serene face. A certainty settled in his chest, solid and unshakable. He was doing the right thing. It didn't matter what the legal complications were, the explanations he would have to give, the adjustments to his life. No child, none, should live alone on the streets, sleeping in cardboard boxes, unsure of their next meal or if they would survive the night. The contrast between the Clara from a few hours ago, sitting alone on the sidewalk, and this child sleeping peacefully on his sofa was so stark it almost hurt. How could an entire society fail its most vulnerable members so completely? With these thoughts, Reed finally allowed himself to relax as well. The day had been long and emotionally draining. He closed his eyes for a moment, just to rest. When he awoke, the soft morning light was filtering through the windows. He had fallen asleep in the armchair. Clara was still sleeping soundly on the sofa, wrapped in the blanket, only her little face and a few curls of hair visible. Reed got up silently and went to the kitchen to make coffee. While the espresso machine worked, he called his assistant. "Lucy, I need you to cancel all my appointments for today," he said in a low voice so as not to wake Clara. "All of them, Mr. Matthews?" Lucy's voice sounded surprised on the other end of the line. Reed never cancelled meetings. "Yes, all of them. I have a personal matter to attend to. I also need you to do some shopping for me." He listed basic items for a 6-year-old: clothes, shoes, hygiene products, some educational toys, and children's books. "Mr. Matthews, is this for, a child?" Lucy asked, confused. "Exactly. I'll explain everything later. Please have it delivered this morning." After hanging up, Reed drank his coffee while looking out the window. The city was already awake below, people rushing to work, cars honking, the normal routine of a weekday. His own routine had been completely upended in less than 24 hours. A small sound made him turn. Clara was sitting up on the sofa, sleepily rubbing her eyes. Her hair was messy, the large shirt wrinkled, but there was a healthy color in her cheeks that wasn't there the day before. "Good morning," Reed said gently. Clara looked around, seeming momentarily confused about where she was. Then her eyes met Reed's, and she visibly relaxed, remembering the events of the previous day. "Good morning," she replied, her voice still hoarse from sleep. "Did you sleep well?" She nodded, hugging Mr. Bubbles and Star. "Your house is very quiet," Reed smiled. "Want some breakfast?" "I don't have much, but we can order something." Clara's eyes lit up at the mention of food. "Can I have cereal?" "Cereal?" Reed tried to remember if he had anything like that in the pantry. "I don't think I have any, but we can buy some today. How about eggs and toast for now?" "Okay," she agreed, sliding off the sofa and carefully folding the blanket that had covered her during the night. The domesticity of the gesture, a 6-year-old child concerned with keeping things tidy, touched Reed deeply. Clara was clearly not used to being cared for. On the contrary, she seemed accustomed to taking care of herself and her few possessions. As he prepared a simple breakfast, Reed watched Clara timidly explore the living room. She tiptoed around as if afraid to make a sound, stopping to examine the art objects and the framed photographs on the walls, mostly landscapes and a few corporate photos, nothing personal. "Do you live alone?" she finally asked, stopping in front of a picture of Reed receiving some business award. "Yes," he replied, placing scrambled eggs and toast on the table. "I always have." Clara climbed onto a chair, her legs dangling without reaching the floor. "Isn't it lonely?" The question, so direct and innocent, caught Reed by surprise. "Sometimes," he admitted, realizing it was true. "But I'm used to it." They ate in silence for a few minutes, Clara savoring every bite as if it were a rare delicacy. "Thank you for the food," she said when she finished, with a politeness that seemed out of place in someone so young. "It was very good." "You're welcome," Reed replied, still impressed by her manners. "Clara, Some things will be arriving for you today. New clothes, shoes, some things for you to play with. Is that okay?" She looked at him in astonishment. "For me? Yes. You can't just wear that shirt, can you?" A shy smile appeared on her face. "Can I really stay with you?" The question was loaded with both hope and fear. Reed realized he needed to be honest, but gentle. "For now, yes," he answered carefully. "I'm going to do everything I can to take care of you, Clara. But there are rules and laws about children without parents. We'll need to talk to some official people to decide what happens next." Instead of getting upset, Clara just nodded, as if she had expected something like this. "I understand." In the days that followed, a routine began to form. The deliveries arrived, colorful and comfortable clothes that Clara touched with reverence, shoes that actually fit her feet, books with bright pictures that she flipped through for hours, and toys that she carefully organized in the guest room that was now hers. Reed worked remotely, taking only the most important meetings by video conference. The rest of the time, he watched Clara adapt to her new environment. She explored every corner of the apartment with growing curiosity, a little more confident each day. She spent hours drawing with the colored pencils Reed had bought, creating pictures of houses and flowers and people holding hands. She asked questions about everything: how the elevator worked, why the lights turned on without a match, who had painted the pictures on the walls. One morning, Reed found her on the glass-enclosed balcony, watching the city below. "Everything is so far away," she commented when he approached. "Once the people look like ants." "It's quite a view," Reed agreed, sitting beside her. "Did you always want to live so high up?" Clara asked, her curious eyes fixed on his. Reed thought for a moment. "I don't think I ever stopped to think about it. It was more something that happened when I started becoming successful in business." Clara nodded, as if she perfectly understood the concept of business success. "It's pretty here, but a little lonely, isn't it?" There it was again, that perceptive observation that seemed to see through all the layers of sophistication and wealth to the heart of the matter. "Yes," Reed admitted, surprising himself with his own honesty. "I guess it is." Clara smiled, a smile that now appeared more frequently and lit up her whole face. "But now you have me and Mr. Bubbles and Star. You're not alone anymore." Reed felt something warm and unexpected expand in his chest. "No, I'm not alone anymore," he agreed, returning the smile. As the days passed, Reed began to notice changes in himself. Working obsessively late into the night no longer seemed so important. Instead, he found himself looking forward to finishing his calls to help Clara with a puzzle or read her a story before bed. The apartment was changing too. Colorful drawings now decorated the refrigerator, held up by fruit-shaped magnets. Children's books took up space on shelves once reserved only for business biographies and classic literature. A pink and purple blanket with unicorn prints, Clara's choice, was folded over the immaculate white sofa. Small changes, but significant ones. On the fifth night, as Reed read a story to Clara in her bed, now decorated with princess sheets and surrounded by stuffed animals, he realized something profound. Her presence was filling a void he hadn't even known existed in his life. Looking at Clara's attentive little face, absorbing every word of the story, Reed felt a certainty grow within him. No matter what the legal or personal obstacles might be, he would do whatever it took to give this child the home she deserved. And perhaps, in the process, he had also found something he didn't know he was looking for. The digital clock on the corner of the desk read 1:43 a.m. Reed Matthews sat in his home office, the only light coming from the desk lamp and the computer screen that cast a blue glow on his tired face. The apartment was steeped in silence, the kind of silence that had once seemed normal to him, but now contrasted with the life Clara had brought into these walls. The meeting with the social worker was scheduled for 2 days from now. Before him, spread across the mahogany desk, were documents, forms, and reports, all the bureaucracy needed to start the process of temporary guardianship. Reed rubbed his tired eyes and leaned back in his leather chair. He took a sip of the whiskey he had poured hours ago, which was now warm. On the computer screen, a detailed spreadsheet listed all the steps of the legal process, the deadlines, the requirements, the possibilities. The truth was, even with all his money and influence, the path would be complicated. A single man, with no experience with children, no close relatives, and a career that consumed 18 hours a day. He wasn't exactly the profile social services considered ideal for caring for a traumatized child. He stood up and walked to the window. The city slept below, dotted with lights. Somewhere in that urban vastness, there was a dark alley with cardboard boxes where Clara could be sleeping, if fate hadn't brought them together. The thought made his stomach churn. He had called the best law firm in the city that morning. The lawyer, a family law specialist, was direct. "I'll be honest with you, Mr. Matthews. This will be a long and possibly frustrating process. The system prioritizes biological relatives, even distant ones. If they find any of the girl's relatives, your chances decrease considerably." Reed returned to his desk and looked at the photo he kept beside his computer. Clara smiling at the amusement park, sitting on the carousel. It was the first picture he had taken of her, the day they met. Only 2 weeks ago, but it felt like a lifetime. The conflict in his chest grew with each passing day. Part of him, the rational part, the cold, calculating executive, insisted he was getting too involved, creating unrealistic expectations. What kind of father could he be? He could barely keep plants alive in his apartment. His own childhood had been marked by the absence of his father, always too busy with business to attend school plays or birthdays. Was he about to repeat the same pattern? Promising to care for someone, only to fail when the reality of his responsibilities set in. Reed picked up another document, the preliminary report the social worker had sent after her first visit. The words jumped off the page. The child shows clear signs of attachment to Mr. Matthews and risk of further abandonment trauma if the situation does not stabilize. Further abandonment trauma. The words echoed in his mind. He closed his eyes, remembering how Clara had asked him that very morning and while they were having breakfast. "Reed, when are you leaving?" The question had caught him off guard. "Leaving? I'm not going anywhere, Clara. This is my home." "No, I mean—" She hesitated, stirring her cereal with the spoon. When are you going to send me away?" Something broke inside him at that moment, the realization that for Clara, abandonment wasn't a possibility, but a certainty, just a matter of time. "I'm not going to send you away," he had said, with a firmness that surprised them both. Ever. But could he keep that promise? Reed looked at the pile of documents with a growing sense of helplessness. The system was complicated, impersonal, bureaucratic. Clara was just one case among thousands. His money could help up to a point, but it guaranteed nothing. And there was the deeper question, was he really the best person for Clara? A little girl needed stability, routine, constant presence. Things he had never valued in his own life. Maybe there was a family out there, a loving couple, with other children, a house with a yard and a dog that could give Clara everything he couldn't. The thought of Clara living with another family, calling someone else daddy, growing up far away from him, made his chest ache in a way he had never felt before. Reed picked up his phone and scrolled through his recent photos. Clara concentrating on her drawing at the kitchen table, Clara asleep with a book open on her chest, Clara and him making silly faces for the camera during an impromptu picnic in the living room. Small moments that had infiltrated his life like sunbeams through cracks, illuminating corners he didn't even know were dark. He knew it was too late to pretend he didn't care, too late to protect himself emotionally. In just 2 weeks, that little girl with her tattered teddy bear had become the most important person in his life. Reed returned to the window, watching the dark sky. The truth hit him with crystal clarity. Maybe he couldn't be everything Clara needed. Maybe he would make mistakes, a lot of them. Maybe there would be times when he wouldn't know what to do or say. But he also knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't bear to see her leave. He couldn't let her be alone again. The sound of light footsteps interrupted his thoughts. He turned to find Clara standing in the office doorway, sleepy, clutching Mr. Bubbles. "I can't sleep," she murmured, rubbing her eyes. "I had a bad dream." Reed immediately set the documents aside and went to her, kneeling to be at eye level. "Do you want to tell me about the dream?" he asked gently. Clara shook her head. I just wanted to see if you were still here." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of all the abandonment she had ever experienced in her short life. "I'm here," Reed assured her, a lump forming in his throat. "I'll always be here." He scooped her up into his arms, surprised once again at how light she was. Clara rested her head on his shoulder, the scent of strawberry-scented children's shampoo filling the air. "Let's get you back to bed," Reed said, carrying her down the dark hallway. "Will you stay until I fall asleep?" she asked in a low voice. "I will." In Clara's room, now decorated with the colors and toys she had chosen, Reed gently placed her in bed and pulled the blanket up to her chin. He sat on the edge of the mattress, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Reed," Clara murmured, already half asleep. "Yes, you're good at being a dad." The simple, sincere words struck Reed like a lightning bolt. He swallowed hard, fighting the emotion that threatened to overflow. "Sleep well, Clara," he managed to say, his voice a little hoarse. In a few minutes, her breathing became deep and regular. Reed stayed there, watching her serene face amidst the soft shadows cast by the moon-shaped nightlight. Something settled within him, a firm resolution that replaced the storm of doubts. It wouldn't be easy. There would be obstacles, challenges, moments of uncertainty. Maybe he wouldn't be perfect, he certainly wouldn't be. But as he watched that sleeping child who trusted him so completely, Reed knew, with a certainty that came from the depths of his being, that he would do anything to keep her safe, to watch her grow, to never again let her feel the abandonment that had marked her young life. Leaving her alone again would be simply impossible. He returned silently to his office, looked at the pile of documents, and with renewed determination, sat down to continue working. Every form filled out, every requirement met, every obstacle overcome would bring him one step closer to making official what his heart already knew. Clara was his family now, and he would fight with all his might to ensure no one ever took her away from him. The early morning was perfectly silent, the kind of silence that seems to amplify even the softest of sounds, the distant ticking of a clock, the almost imperceptible hum of the refrigerator, the occasional sigh of the wind against the apartment windows. Reed was deep in sleep when the sound reached him, faint, distant, but unmistakable. A cry. His eyes snapped open instantly, his mind still foggy as it tried to process what he had heard. For a moment, he lay still, wondering if he had dreamed it. Then the sound came again, louder this time, a sob followed by a low moan. "Clara." Reed threw the covers aside and got up in one motion. The digital clock on the nightstand read 3:17 a.m. He left his room and hurried down the dark hallway, guided only by the star-shaped nightlight he had installed so Clara wouldn't be afraid of the dark. When he opened her bedroom door, the scene squeezed his heart. Clara was sitting up in bed, her face red and contorted from crying, tears streaming freely down her cheeks. She was hugging Mr. Bubbles tightly, as if the teddy bear were her only anchor in an invisible storm. "Clara," he called softly, turning on the lamp. "What happened?" She looked up at him, and Reed immediately noticed something was wrong. Her normally pale face was flushed, her eyes too bright, and not just from the tears. "It hurts," was all she could manage between sobs, pointing to her throat. Reed quickly approached and sat on the edge of the bed. He placed his hand on her forehead and felt the heat radiating against his palm. A fever, no doubt. "It's hot in here," Clara said, pushing the blanket away. "And I had a bad dream." "What dream?" Reed asked, already looking for the thermometer he had bought as part of the children's first aid kit the pharmacy had delivered the week before. "The darkness wanted to get me," she answered, her voice hoarse and frightened. "I ran and ran, but I couldn't find you." Reed found the thermometer and gently placed it on Clara's forehead. As he waited for the reading, he took her small, warm hand in his. "I'm here now," he assured her. "I won't let any darkness get you." The thermometer beeped. 101.7 degree. Not alarming, but certainly a fever that required attention. "We'll take care of this," he said, keeping his voice calm despite the worry that was beginning to grow. He had never taken care of a sick child before. "Can you swallow? I need you to take some medicine." Clara nodded weakly, still sobbing. Reed went to the bathroom and got the children's fever reducer the pediatrician had recommended he keep on hand. He carefully measured the dose and returned to the room, where Clara was still sitting up, looking small and vulnerable against the pillows. "This will make you feel better," he promised, helping her take the medicine. Clara made a face at the taste, but swallowed obediently. Reed then went to the kitchen and returned with a glass of fresh water. "Small sips," he instructed, holding the glass while she drank. When she finished, Clara looked at him with pleading eyes. "Stay with me. I'm afraid to go back to the bad dream." "Of course I'll stay," Reed answered without hesitation. He sat on the bed and, noticing Clara was still shivering slightly, opened his arms. She immediately snuggled against his chest. "Mr." Bubbles squeezed between them. Reed could feel the heat of the fever through her thin pajamas, her small body tense and uncomfortable. Carefully, he settled her in his lap, propping his back against several pillows. Clara relaxed against him, her head heavy on his shoulder. Reed began to rock her gently, an instinctive motion he didn't even know he knew. "Do you want me to tell you a story?" he offered. She nodded, her eyes half closed. Reed wasn't good with stories. His analytical mind was more accustomed to financial reports and strategic plans than to fairy tales. But something inside him, perhaps the same instinct that made him rock her, began to weave words. "So once upon a time there was a little star D," he began, his voice low and soft in the darkness of the room. "She was the smallest star in the sky, so small that she sometimes felt invisible." Clara sighed lightly, her eyes now fixed on him, despite her fatigue. "One day," Reed continued, "a strong cosmic wind separated her from the other stars. She fell through space, scared and alone, until she landed on Earth. She was lost and afraid, not knowing how to get back home." Clara's fingers played absently with a button on Reed's pajama shirt as she listened. "The little star wandered the Earth, trying to find her way back. Some people passed her by without noticing. Others saw only a faint glow and moved on. Until one day, a man found her." "Did he see the star?" Clara asked, her voice already less tense. "Yes," Reed smiled. "He not only saw her, but he realized how special she was. Even though she was small, her light was purer and more beautiful than any star he had ever seen." "What did he do?" "He took care of her. He built a safe place where the little star could shine without fear. And although he knew that one day she might want to return to the sky, he decided that as long as she was on Earth, she would never be alone again." Clara smiled faintly, her eyes growing heavier. "I like that story," she murmured. Reed continued to rock her gently, feeling her body gradually relax. Her forehead was still warm, but the sobs had stopped. After a few minutes, her breathing deepened, becoming more regular. Even when he realized Clara had fallen asleep, Reed made no move to leave. He stayed there, holding her, watching her little face that, even in sleep, still showed traces of tears on her cheeks. Her vulnerability hit him with full force. This little life trusted him completely, depended on him for everything: comfort, safety, care. The thought was both terrifying and deeply moving. He had never imagined this role for himself. His life plan had always been clear: build a business empire, earn the respect of his peers, perhaps leave some kind of legacy in the business world. Children, family, the emotional complications that came with these ties, all of that was conveniently absent from his future projections. And then Clara appeared, an unexpected variable that had rewritten the entire equation. Now, holding her in his arms as she fought a fever, Reed knew there was no going back. The instinct to protect her, to keep her safe and happy, had taken root so deeply in his being that it felt like it had always been there, just waiting to be awakened. The future was still uncertain. The hearing with the judge, the investigation by social services, the possibility of distant relatives appearing, there were many potential obstacles in the way. Reed had no illusions about the complexity of the situation, but as he watched Clara's now peaceful sleep, a certainty formed within him, solid and unshakable as rock. He would do anything to protect her, anything to ensure she would never have to face the world alone again. Carefully, Reed tucked the blanket around her, making sure Mr. Bubbles was also comfortably settled by her side. He couldn't say how long he stayed there, watching over her sleep, attentive to any sign of discomfort or restlessness. The silent night continued its course, the sleeping city outside unaware of the small drama unfolding in that apartment. A man discovering, perhaps for the first time, what it meant to put someone completely above himself. A child finding, after so much loss, the security of arms that would not let her fall. And as the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the curtains, Reed understood something fundamental. No matter what the future held, the present had already been irrevocably transformed. Clara had become his world, and he would do everything in his power to be hers. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon. Reed and Clara were putting together a puzzle in the living room as the autumn sun created golden patterns on the hardwood floor. "I got it!" Clara exclaimed, fitting a blue piece in after several attempts. Reed smiled, admiring her determination, when the doorbell rang, interrupting the moment. "Are we expecting someone?" Clara asked, curious. "No," Reed answered, frowning. When he checked the intercom, his body stiffened. "Keep working on the puzzle. I'll be right back." Clara noticed the tension in his shoulders, but nodded silently as he walked to the door. On the other side, standing like a figure from his most uncomfortable memories, was his father. Harold Matthews, 72 years old, perfectly combed grey hair, impeccable suit, the same severe expression as always. "Father," Reed said, his voice controlled, "this is unexpected." "Evidently," Harold replied, his cold gaze scanning the room. "May I come in, or are we going to talk in the hallway like strangers?" Reed hesitated, aware of Clara in the living room, but stepped aside, allowing his father to enter. Harold walked in with the presumption of someone who feels entitled to occupy any space. His eyes immediately found Clara, who was now standing, holding Mr. Bubbles against her chest. "So it's true," he commented, his voice laced with disapproval. "Lucy mentioned something about you cancelling important meetings for personal commitments. I didn't imagine it would be this." "Clara," Reed called, keeping his voice firm but gentle, "why don't you go finish the puzzle in your room? I'll be back to help you in a few minutes." Clara looked from Reed to Harold, sensing the tension. With a small nod, she grabbed a few pieces and quickly left, casting one last worried glance before disappearing down the hall. As soon as he heard the bedroom door close, Reed faced his father. "What exactly do you want?" Harold examined the changes in the room, the drawings on the fridge, the toys organized in a basket, a children's book on the table. "The board is concerned," he said finally. "You've missed 3 important meetings this month. The East Asia project is practically at a standstill, and now I find out it's because of some domestic situation." "Clara is not a situation," Reed replied, his voice low but firm. "She's a child who needed help." What Reed didn't know was that Clara hadn't gone to her room. Driven by fear, she had stopped in the hallway, hidden, listening to every word. Harold let out an impatient sigh. "I always knew you had this sentimental weakness. But this," he gestured to the modified apartment, "so this is why you're not showing up at the company. This girl will ruin your future." In the hallway, Clara felt tears begin to stream. The older man's words confirmed her greatest fear, that one day Reed would realize she was a burden and send her away like everyone else. Unable to listen anymore, she ran to her room, quietly closing the door before throwing herself on the bed, muffling her sobs in her pillow. In the living room, Reed faced his father with a clarity he had never felt before. "I'm only going to say this once," he said, each word filled with conviction. "I'm going to keep her. And nothing is going to change that. You're throwing away everything And you know what?" Reed interrupted him, years of repressed feelings finally finding a voice. "I'm going to be a much better father than you were to me." A heavy silence fell between them. Harold looked as if he had been physically struck by his son's words. For a brief moment, something like pain flickered in his eyes, quickly replaced by his usual mask of indifference. "You were always stubborn," he said finally, "just like your mother. But when this madness inevitably fails, don't come looking for my support." "I've never needed it before," Reed replied calmly. "I'm not going to start now." Harold adjusted his jacket. "The board expects your presence at Monday's meeting," Don't miss this one." Without another word, he headed for the door and left, leaving only the echo of his footsteps in the hall. Reed stood motionless for a few moments, breathing deeply. The confrontation had been brief but intense. For the first time, he didn't feel that familiar sense of inadequacy. He had said exactly what he thought, without backing down. It was then he noticed the silence coming from Clara's room. Suddenly worried, he walked over and knocked gently on the door. "Clara? May I come in?" There was no answer, just a faint sniffle. Reed opened the door slowly. Clara was curled up on the bed, hugging Mr. Bubbles, her face stained with tears. His heart ached seeing the look of helplessness in her eyes. "Hey," he said softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "What happened?" "I heard," she confessed in a low voice, unable to look at him. "Your dad doesn't like me." Reed felt a wave of guilt. He should have been more careful. "My father doesn't know you," he answered gently. "He barely knows me, to be honest." Clara finally lifted her eyes, red from crying. "Do I have to leave?" she asked, her voice trembling with the fear of abandonment. Reed held her small hands in his, looking directly into her eyes. "No," he said with absolute firmness. "I want you to stay with me. Here. This is your home now." "Even if I ruin your future?" she asked, repeating the cruel words. "You're not ruining anything," Reed stated. "In fact, you're making my future much better, happier." Clara studied him for a long moment, as if searching for any sign of uncertainty. What she saw must have convinced her, because slowly, hesitantly, the fear in her face gave way to a fragile hope. "Promise," she whispered. "I promise," Reed answered without hesitation. "We're in this together, Clara. Nothing my father or anyone else says will change that." To his surprise, Clara threw herself into his arms, hugging him with all the strength her small body possessed. Reed held her, feeling her tears soak his shirt. But these were no longer tears of fear. For the first time since he had found her on that sidewalk, Clara truly believed she would not be left behind. That she had, at last, found a place where she belonged. And Reed, holding her tightly, made a silent promise that he would do everything in his power to never break that precious and hard-won trust. The apartment remained quiet after Harold left. Reed sat on the sofa next to Clara, both lost in their own thoughts. The unfinished puzzle on the coffee table seemed forgotten in the whirlwind of emotions the confrontation had stirred up. Clara clung to Reed's arm, her small hand gripping his shirt sleeve tightly, as if she feared he might disappear. "Are you okay?" Reed asked, breaking the silence. Clara nodded, but her eyes still held a shadow of worry. It was in that moment, watching her face still marked by recent tears, that Reed made his decision. He couldn't put it off any longer. The temporary measures, the provisional solutions, none of it was enough. Clara deserved more than uncertainty. "Clara," he said, turning to face her, "remember when we talked about you staying here?" She nodded, hanging on his every word. "I want to make it official, permanent. I want to adopt you if you'll have me." Clara's eyes widened, trying to absorb the full meaning of his words. "Adopt," she repeated. "Like, be your real daughter." "Exactly," Reed confirmed. "Legally, officially, forever." For a moment, Clara was still. Then slowly, a smile lit up her face, starting at her lips and spreading to her eyes. "I want to," she said, her voice small but decided. The next morning, Reed called his lawyer and scheduled a meeting to formally begin the adoption process. The road would be long and potentially complicated, but he was determined. Nothing would stop him. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Endless forms were filled out, statements signed, documents gathered. Reed's apartment was subjected to inspections, his background was investigated, his finances examined, his routine evaluated. Melissa Carter, the social worker assigned to the case, was a middle-aged woman with kind but observant eyes that missed nothing. In her first official visit, she interviewed Reed and Clara separately. "How do you feel living here, Clara?" Melissa asked Clara, sitting on the bed with Mr. Bubbles in her lap, thought for a moment. "Happy," she replied simply. Reed listens to me, and he never yells at me, even when I spill things, Melissa smiled. And would you like him to officially become your father? Clara nodded vigorously. He's already my dad in my heart, she said, placing a small hand over her chest. It just needs to be on paper. In the living room, Reed faced his own tough questions. Mr. Matthews, your work schedule is extremely demanding, Melissa observed. How do you plan to balance that with raising a child? I've already made significant changes, Reed answered. I've rearranged my schedule, delegated responsibilities, and set clear boundaries between work and family time. Clara is my priority now. Melissa studied him. What makes you believe you can offer Clara what she needs? Reed took a deep breath. Honestly, I'm learning every day. I make mistakes, but what I can guarantee is that Clara will never again feel abandonment or neglect. She will have stability, education, opportunities, and above all, unconditional love. As the process moved forward, Reed's anxiety grew. Each new requirement, each new investigation felt like a potential barrier. What if they found a distant relative of Clara's? What if they considered his workaholic history a disqualifier? What if his father tried to interfere? One night, after putting Clara to bed, Reed sat in the dark living room, the adoption file open in front of him. The fear of losing Clara had become a constant in his days. I won't let them take you from me, he muttered to himself, renewed determination strengthening his resolve. Meanwhile, Clara blossomed with each passing day. The trauma of her past experiences hadn't disappeared. There were still occasional nightmares, moments of insecurity, reflexes of someone who had known hunger and abandonment, but there was also a new confidence in her. In weekly therapy, Clara began to process her experiences. I have a place now, she told her therapist, and someone who takes care of me. At the preschool where she was temporarily enrolled, Clara proudly told the other students about her new dad and the apartment where she now lived. She drew countless versions of herself and Reed together, always holding hands, always smiling under a big yellow sun. For Reed, the transformation in his own life was equally profound. The work-obsessed executive now found his greatest satisfaction in the small moments, helping Clara with her drawings, reading stories before bed, celebrating when she learned to tie her own shoes. I can't imagine my life without her anymore, Reed confessed to his lawyer as they reviewed the final details of the process. It's like she was always meant to be there. Finally, after 3 months of paperwork, meetings, and anxious waiting, the big day arrived. The family courthouse was a solemn place, with marble hallways and heavy wooden doors. Reed, wearing his best suit, held Clara's hand. She wore a light blue dress bought especially for the occasion. Nervous? He asked, noticing how she clutched Mr. Bubbles. Clara shook her head, but her restless eyes betrayed her anxiety. What if the judge says no? Reed knelt to her eye level. Then we'll keep trying. I'm not giving up, Clara. Ever. The courtroom was less intimidating than they had imagined, smaller and cozier, with Judge Thompson, a man with grey hair and a kind smile, presiding over the proceedings. As the lawyer presented the case and the social worker gave her positive report, Reed kept his gaze fixed on Clara, who was swinging her legs in a chair too big for her. Their eyes met, and he winked at her, a gesture of reassurance. After what felt like an eternity, Judge Thompson finally spoke. Having reviewed all the documents and evidence presented, I am convinced that this adoption is in the best interest of the child. Therefore, I officially confirm the adoption of Clara Matthews by Reed Matthews, with all the rights and responsibilities that accompany the parent-child relationship. The soft bang of the gavel sealed the decision, but Reed barely heard it. His attention was fully on Clara, whose face lit up as she understood what had just happened. Is it over? She asked, looking between Reed and the lawyer. Is it official? Yes, Reed confirmed, his voice choked with emotion. It's official. We're a family now. Clara didn't wait for another word. With a small cry of joy, she jumped from her chair and ran to Reed, throwing herself into his arms with such force she nearly knocked him over. He hugged her tightly, lifting her off the ground and spinning her around as she laughed, a pure sound that echoed through the solemn room. Congratulations to you both, Judge Thompson said, smiling as he watched the scene. When they finally left the courthouse, the sun was shining brightly, as if nature itself was celebrating the moment. Clara skipped beside Reed, still holding his hand, but now with a new sense of security. "Can we celebrate?" she asked, looking up at him expectantly. "Of course we can," Reed replied. "What would you like to do?" Clara thought for a moment. "Can we go to that coffee shop with the pretty cupcakes?" They found a cozy little coffee shop a few blocks from the courthouse. Reed ordered hot chocolate for Clara and coffee for himself, along with 2 cupcakes decorated with colorful frosting. Sitting by the window, watching people pass by outside, Reed realized how different everything felt now. The world was the same, but he saw it through new eyes, a father's eyes. Others. Clara nibbled her cupcake thoughtfully, a frosting mustache forming above her upper lip. "What are you thinking about?" Reed asked. She looked at him, an unexpectedly serious expression on her young face. "I always dreamed of going to school," she confessed, her voice almost a whisper, as if revealing a precious secret. "Mommy used to say school was magic, that books could take me anywhere." Reed felt a wave of tenderness thinking of Clara's mother, a woman who, despite her hardships, had planted dreams and hope in her daughter's heart. He reached across the table and took her small hand in his. "Now you can," he replied firmly. "We'll choose a school together. The best school, where you can learn anything you want." Clara's eyes sparkled. "Can I learn to read all the books in the world?" "All of them," Reed promised, smiling. "And then you can write your own." The future, which had once seemed so uncertain for them both, now opened up before them, full of endless possibilities. 2 weeks later, Reed parked the car in front of Westbrook Elementary School, a respected institution with a strong program in arts and sciences. It was the first day of school. Clara wore her new uniform, a pleated skirt, a white blouse, and a navy blue sweater. The purple backpack she had chosen looked almost too big for her small shoulders. "Ready?" Reed asked, lightly adjusting the bow tie she had insisted on wearing. Clara took a deep breath and nodded, a mix of nervousness and excitement on her face. "Wait," Reed said, taking out his phone. "Let's capture this moment." Clara posed proudly at the school entrance, holding her backpack with both hands. Her smile was radiant, full of hope and anticipation for what was to come. After dropping her off in her classroom and meeting her teacher, a warm woman named Mrs. Martinez, who immediately won Clara's trust, Reed went back to his office for the first time in weeks. At the end of the day, when he went to pick her up, Clara ran to him in the schoolyard, carrying a stack of papers and talking non-stop about her new friend Lily, the giant library, and how Mrs. Martinez had praised her drawing. "Sounds like it was a great day," Reed commented, helping her into the car. "The best," Clara agreed, still beaming. "Can we go to the park before we go home? I want to show you what I learned today." At the park, Clara proudly recited the letters of the alphabet she had practiced and showed how she could count to 20 without making a mistake. Reed applauded each demonstration, genuinely impressed by her quick absorption of knowledge. As they sat on a bench watching the sunset, Reed realized he wanted to capture this moment too. "Shall we take a picture together?" he suggested, sitting beside her. Clara immediately straightened up, leaning against him as Reed extended his arm to frame them both in the selfie. At the last second, she turned her face and gave him a kiss on the cheek, just as he pressed the button. The photo perfectly captured the moment, Reed smiling, surprised and emotional, and Clara with her lips pressed against his cheek, her eyes closed in pure joy. When they got home, Clara asked to see the photo. She looked at it for a long moment, then ran to her room. She returned minutes later with a sheet of colored paper where she had carefully written, in a childish but determined hand, "Our family. I love you, Daddy." Reed stood motionless, struck by the force of those simple words, especially the last one. It was the first time Clara had called him Daddy. "Can we put the picture and my note on the wall?" she asked, looking hopefully at him. "Even better," Reed replied, his voice slightly hoarse. "We'll put them in a special frame." That night, after Clara fell asleep, Reed carefully placed the photo and the note in a silver frame he had bought weeks earlier, as if he had somehow known this moment would come. He hung it on the living room wall, in the center, where it would be the first thing anyone would see upon entering. He stared at the image for a long time. He and Clara, now officially father and daughter, their smiles reflecting the joy they had found in each other. Below, the simple but profound words, "Our family. I love you, Daddy." For the first time in his adult life, Reed felt he had a true home. Not just a stylish apartment where he slept and worked, but a home, a place of belonging, of bonds that transcended contracts and legal documents, a place where, against all odds, two lonely souls had found each other and created a family. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.